This is the Authority Partners Podcast.
Welcome to the Authority Partners Podcast. Today my guest in studio is Ioanna Papakanderaki. We will talk about sprint goal, a key element for happy Scrum team. Before we start with this interesting topic, let me welcome Ioanna, who is a program manager at Authority Partners. Further on, she's an electrical and computer engineer with specialization in power and biomedical engineering. Ioanna started to work at Authority Partners as a Scrum Master in 2017, and currently she has been working as a program manager on enterprise projects. Agile enthusiast as well, constantly working on improving the process for a smoother adaptation into agile frameworks and mindset. Hello, and it's great to have you in the studio today.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be here today and discussing this topic with you.
Ioanna, what is a sprint goal?
So I would like to start our conversation and discussion today by sharing with you the definition of the sprint goal as mentioned in the Scrum Guide by scrum.org. So basically, the sprint goal is an objective set for the sprint that can be met through the implementation of product backlog. It provides guidance to the development team on why it is building the increment. It is created during the sprint planning meeting, and the sprint goal gives the development team some flexibility regarding the functionality implemented within the sprint. The selected product backlog items delivering one coherent function can be the sprint goal. So the sprint goal can be any other coherence that causes the development team to work together rather than one separate initiative. Essentially, the sprint goal is the vision of the team in the sprint. People often believe that the sprint goal is a set of tasks that they need to be delivered by the end of the sprint, but essentially the sprint goal is a high-level summary. Let's say something like a small text or 1-2 sentences that the team, along with the product owner, would like to accomplish during the sprint. For example, a sprint goal can be improving exception or error handling in one of the applications. Now, the methods, the exact items that they are planned for this sprint should serve the purpose and the goal and describe in which ways and how we can meet this goal. So by the end of the sprint, we have a proper error and exception handling. And we can see the benefits of the sprint goal right from its definition. So all the Scrum events that need to take place in a sprint duration, such as daily Scrum, sprint planning, sprint retrospective, sprint review, are focusing on several aspects around the sprint goal. Let's take, for example, daily Scrum. Daily Scrum is a time box event that inspects the progress towards the sprint goal. Daily Scrum is a meeting on which the teams should ensure that the progress that is being made on a daily basis is sufficient enough for the sprint goal to be completed by the end of the sprint. Now, there are different ways that teams are performing the daily Scrum, but essentially what a team member needs to have in mind while going in this daily Scrum meeting is there are three key questions around that. So the member needs to think, what did I do yesterday to help my team to meet this sprint goal? What am I planning to do today to be able to deliver this sprint goal? And are there any impediments to me or to any other team members that can put this sprint goal at risk?
Well, in a context of Scrum events, why sprint goal is important?
So we have talked about one of the Scrum events, the daily Scrum, but the pros of having the sprint goal can be seen through other Scrum events as well, like sprint planning. If you are lucky enough to have a goal that you want to achieve by the end of the sprint, then identifying the methods and the how can give basically purpose on the sprint planning. The team collaboratively works on identifying the exact items that are necessary to fulfill this goal. On the other hand, if you don't have a goal, but you have a direction or a prioritization from the product owner, grouping the planned items together into formalizing the sprint goal, it's a bit more difficult, but it gives the team the time on the sprint planning meeting to understand what and why they are going to work on, which items they are planned to work on. In the sprint review meeting, on the other hand, we are reviewing what was achieved, if the sprint goal was met, and get valuable feedback from the sprint goal. And the product owners and the stakeholders can make decisions on how to proceed and maybe even further identify sprint goal for the future sprint. It is not a coincidence that a sprint goal is being mentioned 27 times in the Scrum Guide. It's the fourth most frequent mentioned word on the guide. So we can understand how really important it is. And apart from the Scrum events, we have 4 basic reasons that shows why the sprint goal is a key element for the Scrum. So number 1 is that the sprint goal provides a clear understanding and a picture to all stakeholders and product owners on what is going to be delivered, what is going to be accomplished, and what to expect by the end of the sprint. The second one is that the sprint goal can help and be a great tool for risk management. If we consider the sprint goal as a fixed budget program with a strict timeline that has to be completed by the end of each sprint, any change or any deviation of the sprint goal shows us actually and indicates immediate risk on the timeline and budget of the program. Then we have that number 3 is that the sprint goal allows the team to focus. In a hectic world like IT world, when we have daily changes, sprint goal is what keeps the Scrum team concentrated and motivated. People tend to be more enthusiastic when they are working for something concrete, when they can see that all their efforts and work has a meaning and that they can see results from it. The sprint goal is like the light at the end of the tunnel. And lastly, and most importantly, the Scrum team gets united and finds ways to work together and achieve a common goal. So the sprint goal plays a key role in team's dynamics, communication, spirit, and keeps the team happy.
Well, that sounds quite straightforward. But let me ask you, what happens if we don't have a sprint goal?
So we have identified what the sprint goal is. We have mentioned how beneficial it is for the team. It's now time, with your question, to go and see our daily routine when we don't have a sprint goal. So without the clear objective for the sprint backlog turns up to be just a list of individual items, each of them representing a patch of work from a different stakeholder. Without a sprint goal, it is very hard to identify if a sprint is successful. The sprint review meeting gets very hard to facilitate and monitor, and actually you cannot get a real benefit from it. And that immediately results on having members working on separate initiatives. Daily Scrum becomes a meeting that everybody is just giving their own updates. There is no concrete goal to the team that is trying to achieve something. I bet most of the daily Scrums that our audience now has participated or listened to, all the members start with the same sentence, yesterday I. And then you have the team members singing inside their heads, yesterday all my troubles seem so far away. So there is no we, there is no team, just individuals trying to finish their tasks, the one after the other. And then when the release comes or the testing comes or the deployment comes, we often hear, it's not my fault, that wasn't my job, I finished my part, now it's up to the other person. And in the same notice, we keep on and on about sprint planning that is turning into an event that teams are tasking out their items without having the time to understand why they are building something. So it takes too much time to plan and task out the product backlog items for 5 different applications from 5 different product owners. So what comes next is members coming on the sprint retrospective meeting complaining that the sprint planning meetings are too long or the daily Scrums takes too much time and they are inefficient. But most important notice is, like a friend of mine likes to say, without a sprint goal, your items, your sticky notes, your tasks never gets done. The members do not feel this sense of completion, of accomplishment, and this check mark is missing.
So why we cannot define the sprint goal? What are the most common difficulties?
I think the reasons why we cannot define the sprint goal often heavily lies on the type of business that we are working on. Apart from the huge giants in the industry like Amazon, Netflix, that they're embracing the latest trends in software development frameworks from the beginning, using waterfall till the new era with the CI/CD pipelines and the whole DevOps culture. Majority of the enterprises, it's just hard to adapt and adjust to the agility that Scrum offers. There is a great read from Amar Arnautovic on Medium with the title, Are the Enterprises Agile Enough for Agile? And that really describes the struggle and the barriers that we can see when we try to fit enterprises into the agile world. So, difficulty number one, business model. Startups are more likely to adapt and adjust in the whole idea of having a common goal and working in agile rather than a heavy enterprise company.
How to start with defining the sprint goal, and can you provide us with important tips on how to create and monitor?
Scrum and generally all the frameworks that falls under the agile umbrella are empirical, experiment-based frameworks. They're heavily dependent on constant feedback, and based on that feedback, you create a whole cycle. That's why on most diagrams that you see describing agile frameworks, we are using cycles to show this continuous improvements. And that being said, and because we are doing agile and we are practicing agile, experiment with your sprint goal, especially if you have difficulties on constant changes, on not planned work on the sprint. You should start with identifying one sprint goal that gets the team focused. It doesn't have to be business related. It doesn't have to be technically related. It can be a process improvement that the whole team can work on together. There is no one solution that fits all, but it's very important to get the team together on the planning session so that we can discuss and formalize the sprint goal. There are many examples of the templates. We can Google on ideas, on questions, how you can do this goal. A simple format is always cool and easy. You can start with a sprint number, with the name of the product that you're working on, your segments of the sprint goal, and then a section of the items that show you how you will achieve the sprint goal. And lastly, you can have the measurements. Was your sprint goal achieved? How did we measure the sprint goal? Which brings us to the last point of the discussion today. It's the monitoring. So the sprint goal needs to be monitored every day, and it should be monitored every day on the daily Scrum. If we are in the first phases and starting with defining the sprint goal, monitoring every priority change or item change that happens during the sprint can give us and the product owners areas of improvements and action items for the Scrum teams and the product owners in the upcoming sprint. So experiment, monitor, and experiment again. So be agile with your sprint goal.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts and knowledge on sprint goal with us today. And thank you, of course, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you for listening to the Authority Partners podcast. Find more episodes via authoritypartners.com or join and follow us at our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Authority Partners podcast.